Okay, so we're all going live on Facebook, and I am also recording this session. So yes, Mehmetka, if you want to translate this quickly.
Hazırmış Facebook'ta naq meydandan anlatış başlandı. Yani bu programma şu yani söhbət xatırlandı. Eğer sual sormakçı bulup isimsiz sual sormakçı bolğanlar bolsa, onun şu şundaq bir tanlaş bar eken, onu tanlasanlar boludu deydi.
Okay, so I see that we have a couple more people now. We can then get started. I first want to thank everyone for joining this session today.
Anlatış başlandı. Yani bu programma şu yani söhbət xatırlandı. Eğer sual sormakçı bulup isimsiz sual sormakçı bolğanlar bolsa, onun şu şundaq bir tanlaş bar eken, onu tanlasanlar boludu deydi. Meni avazımda da kenkildi.
Yes, so first of all, thank you everyone, and thank you to our panelists. So Sir Geoffrey Nice, it is an honor to have you here today. And of course, Sir Mehmet Tohti, who will be interpreting throughout the session.
Bugün bizden bu söhbetimizge Angliyalik tanlıq advokat ve sotçu, Xalqara Cinayet Sotu'nun sabık baş sotçusu, hörmətli Geoffrey Nice efendimi qatnaşdı. Bugün ben Geoffrey Nice efendinin sözlerini Uygurcaga ağdırıp sizlerge yetkizishga tirişiman.
So first of all, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Zumrat Ay Erkin. I am the Program and Advocacy Manager at the World Uyghur Congress. And we are, the World Uyghur Congress has decided to organize this frequently asked questions session about the Uyghur Tribunal in order for to reach a bigger audience, but also to present this big endeavor to the whole community, not only Uyghurs, but also outside of the Uyghur community. And if people have questions, of course, this is meant to be a Q&A kind of session. So please, if you do have questions, don't hesitate. Please write them in the chat. I will be taking the questions. And I cannot guarantee that we will answer all the questions given the time limit, but we will try our best. Please stay relevant to the topic and also be respectful yeah.
Bu Dunya Uyghur Kurultayının bu söhbətini orunlaştırışdan məqsəd Uyghur qırğınçılıq sotu elan qılınğandan keyin nurgun qarindaşlarımız bu haqqında jiq suallarını soradı. Demek ki bu yerdə bu Uyghur qırğınçılıq sotunun yaxşı izahlanışının zörürlüğünü Dünya Uyghur Kurultayı es qilib, şunu bilan bu programmani orunlaşdırdık. Bu programmani orunlaşdırganda, yani bu Uyghur qırğınçılıq sotunu yalnız Uyg'urlarga emas, yani ko'proq o'zimizdan boshqalarga tanıştırishdan maqsad qildik. Bu programның axırında əgər sualı var qarindaşlarımız bolsa, sual və cavab şəklindəki yəni bir qismi var bu proqramның, şu vaxtda da sorusanlar boldu. Biz həmin suallara cavab verə bilişimiz nətayən, lakin şu proqramğa münasibətlik bolğan sualların imkan var cavablaşqa tirişimiz. Sual soraş jarayonida biraz həmmimiz qaydaga bo'ysunib, adab axloqliq bolsaq, texmi yaxshi.
So we will then get started. I want to introduce our panelists today. I will start with Sir Geoffrey Nice. As some of you may already know, Sir Geoffrey Nice is an international renowned barrister. He has practiced as a barrister since 1971.
Aldı bilen hörmətli Geoffrey Nice efendini tanıştırıb ötey. Hörmətli Geoffrey Nice efendi Angliyada və dünyada danlıq advokat, qanunshunos. Bu 1971-yildan başlap şu qanun kasbi bilan shug'ullanishga boshlagan. Shundaq bo'lganda 50 yillik qonun ishlari bilan shug'ullangan bir oq ko'rinishi bor.
He worked, so he is mainly known because of his work at the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Between 1998 and 2006, he has led the prosecution of Slobodan Milosevic, former President of Serbia.
Hürmetlik Geoffrey Nice Efendi, şu xalqaro jinoyat sotida ishlaganligi uchun shu sotda ko'rsatgan xizmatlar bilan yaxshi tanilgan. Geoffrey Nice Efendi 1998 yildan 2006 yilgacha davomlashgan sobiq Yugoslaviyadan bo'linib chiqqan sobiq Yugoslaviyaning sobiq prezidenti Milosevicni sotlashda shu sotga boshlovchi qatnashgan va Milosevicning jazo hukmini bergan sotchining birisi.
Much of his work since then has been connected to cases before the Permanent International Criminal Court, on cases related to Sudan, Kenya, Libya, or pro bono work for victim groups like in Iran, Burma, or North Korea, whose cases cannot get to any international court.
Ondan başka, hürmetlik Geoffrey Nice Efendi, bu Milosevicni cezalandırılan bu sot ahırlaşkandan kim bu? Hizmetleri yani bu xalqaro jinoyat davasını sot bilan munosabatlik bo'lgan. Masalan, Sudandagi, Kenyadagi, Libiyadagi va shu yerlardagi urush jinoyatlari, insoniyatga qarshi ishlangan jinoyatlar qatorliqlarda xalqaro jinoyat sotida shu temalar haqida ishlagan. Undan keyin yana bekorlik holda Burma, Shimoliy Koreya qatorliq joylarda yuz bergan jinoyatlarni tekshirishda aktiv qatnashgan.
He also worked for several related NGOs and gave lectures and commentaries in the media in various countries on international war crime issues.
Ondan başka nurg'unlagan şu hükümetsiz teşkilatlarda rol algan, ondan keyin axborotlarga doim bayonot berib, şu xalqaro jinoyat sotiga munosabatli temalarda dunyo jamoatchiligida oydinlatishga tuhfa qo'shgan.
And he has been a part-time judge since 1984, sitting at the Old Bailey, and has sat as a judge in other jurisdictions, tribunals, and inquiries, such as the China Tribunal last year.
Ondan başka, hürmetlik Geoffrey Nice Efendi 1984 yılı başlap, yani sotçu buluş salayeti bilen nurgun sotlar katnaşkan ve yakınkısı şu China Tribunal yani Xitay sotu deb atalgan Xitoydagi Xitoy hukumatining organlarni yetkazib setish haqida eng oxirgi qarorni berishda Geoffrey Nice Efendi shu sotga aralashgan.
And lastly, between 2009 and 2012, he was vice chair of the Bar Standards Board, the body that regulates barristers.
2009'dan 2012 yılgacha nimada ishlagan dedingiz? Şirket nimada firmaning ismi?
Vice chair of the Bar Standards Board.
Aha. 2009'da 2012 yılgacha şu Angliyadagi bir qonun nimasining muavin raisi bo'lib ishlagan ekan. Shunday qo'ying.
So this is, I guess, a complete or at least a brief introduction of Sir Geoffrey Nice. And as a reminder, this whole session will be interpreted by Mr. Mehmet Tohti, who is the director of Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project.
Mush yuqorqilar hamda qisqacha janobi Geoffrey Nice Efendini tanishtirish uchun qisqacha biz to'plagan ma'lumotlar shu butun suhbatni ya'ni men Mehmet Tohti tarjima qilishga tirishaman imkonimdan yor berishicha.
So without any further ado, I am going to invite Sir Geoffrey Nice for his introduction speech.
Artık kechiktirmasdan hamda so'zni hurmatli Geoffrey Nice Efendiga berayli. Geoffrey Nice Efendi so'zini boshlasın.
Good afternoon. Thank you for welcoming me to this event. I will be brief in order to allow maximum time for questions.
Tushdan keyinlikinglar xayrlik bo'lsin. Nerede yaşadığınıza qarab, ba'zilaringlarga balkim ettigininglar xayrlik bo'lsin. Shimoliy Amerikada bo'lsanglar. Meni bu tanıştığınızlarga ko'p rahmat. Men imkon bor, hozirgi so'zimdan ayta qisqa so'zlayman. Ya'ni buningdan keyin savol so'rash mezgilida biroz vaqtni oshirish uchun so'zimni qisqa tutaman.
I hope to be joined by Nicholas Vetch on the panel because Mr. Vetch and I established the Uyghur Tribunal.
Men bu Nicholas Vetch efendining bu suhbat qatnashishini orzu qilgandim, chunki ikkimiz birlashib shu Uyg'ur sotini qurib chiqishga kuch chiqargan.
I will give you about 10 sentences to explain what a people's tribunal is and what we are doing.
Men sizlarga 10 jumla bilan bu xalq soti, ya'ni Uyg'ur qirg'inchiligi to'g'riliq xat soti nimalardan iborat va nimalarni qildi shuni tushuntiray.
People's tribunal, composed of ordinary citizens, deal with questions that should be asked and answered, but are not asked and answered by individual countries or by international organizations.
Bu xalq soti, ya'ni Uyg'urlarni qirg'inchiligini sotlaydigan bu xalq soti odatdagi fuqarolarni tashkil topgan bo'lib, ya'ni o'sha xalqaro jinoyat soti javob berolmaydigan yoki davlatlar javob bermaydigan shunday savollarga javob tepish uchun terishadi va shunga javob beradi.
I have been involved personally in 4 such tribunals in different capacities.
Men shaxsan mushundaq sotdan 4tiga men shaxsiy salohiyatim bilan qatnashgan.
Their purpose is always the same: to fill a gap in knowledge left by countries, international organizations, because they are unwilling to deal with the question concerned.
Bu yerdagi asosliq maqsad ya'ni shu xalqaro jinoyat soti va xalqaro tashkilotlar va davlatlar javob bermagan va javobsiz qoldirgan shu bo'shliqni to'ldirib shuning javobini tepish uchun bu xalq soti shunday qurilgan.
The members of the tribunal who make the judgment must be uninvolved. We are not activists in an Uyghur cause.
Bu sotga qatnashadigan ya'ni baholug'uchi hay'at yoki juriylar va sotga qatnashganlar hech qaysimiz siyosiy faoliyatchi emas, hech qaysimiz bu Uyg'urlarga munosabatli siyosiy faoliyat qiladigan bir aktivistlar emas. Bular hammasi mustaqil insonlar.
We will ensure that we receive a wide range of evidence. We will consider the evidence and make a judgment about whether crimes have been committed against the Uyghurs by the People's Republic of China, and if so, what crimes?
Biz shuna bo'lganda her taraflamalık delillerni toplaymiz. Toplangan delil asasida tarafsız kararı beremiz ve bergen kararımız Xitay hükümetinin Uygurlar üstüden hazır ilip beravatkan cinayetinin qirg'inchilik jinoyatimi ve başka jinoyatmi shuningga hukm chiqaramiz.
In order to do this fairly, without any influence on us as members of the tribunal, we are completely unpaid.
Yani bu sotdan çıkargan kararının tamamen adil bo'lişi için, tarafsız bo'lişi için biz bu sotçular, yani bu kararını çıkarılan sotçular hak almayız. Yani haksız halde işleyimiz.
And we will make no financial contribution to the enterprise either, because we have to remain completely neutral.
Biz tamamen neytral yoki tarafsız halatimizni saqlab qolish uchun cho'ng shirkatlardan yoki boshqalardan bizning qarorimizga ta'sir ko'rsatish ehtimolligi bo'lgan hech bir organdan moliya yordami hech qanday iqtisodiy manfaat kutmaymiz.
Our purpose is to provide a reliable judgment about the question asked of us, for that judgment then to be used by others, whether state actors, private companies, educational establishments, whatever. We provide the judgment, they will use it.
Bizning bu chiqargan hukmimizning to'liq ishonchlik va tarafsizlik bo'lishi, ya'ni nurg'un xalqaro organlarda javob topilmagan savollarning javobini tepib bu hukmni bergandan keyin tarafsizlik bilan bizning bu chiqargan hukmimiz nurg'un davlatlar tarafidan, nurg'un xalqaro organlar tarafidan buni rasmiy sud hukmi sifatida qabul qila oladi.
For those of you familiar with criminal justice systems where jurors are used for either civil or criminal cases, we are a little like ordinary citizen jurors.
Agar shu jinoiy ishlar da'vosi va boshqa da'volar bilan biroz tanishlik bo'lgan insonlar bo'lsanglar, shuni hammanglar bilishinglar mumkin. Normalda jinoiy ishlar va adliya da'volarida, ya'ni ma'muriy da'vo, boshqa da'volarda, ya'ni juri, ya'ni baholag'uchi hay'at orqali bu qaror chiqariladi. Lekin biz bo'lsak, bu baholag'uchi hay'at tamoman odatdagi fuqarodan shakllangan bo'ldi, ya'ni tarafsiz va bu Uyg'urlar bilan bak ba'da kelib bo'lmagan shuna tarafsiz baholag'uchilar. Ya'ni bizning qaror berish mexanizmimiz va bosqichlarimiz dal shu normal jinoiy ishlar va boshqa da'volar bilan jiq farqlanmaydi. Shu o'xshash o'lcham bo'yicha qaror beramiz.
My last two sentences: for us to do our work properly, two things are vital. First, that we have access to every evidence from wherever possible, from which to make a fair selection upon which to answer the question.
İşimizni muvaffaq qilish uchun bizga ikki muhim vazifa shuni to'g'ri qilishimiz kerak. Uning birisi her jihatdan keladigan dalillarga biz erishishimiz kerak. Ya'ni bu demakchi o'g'ini shu dalil bo'lishga tegishlik va qarindoshlarning qo'lida dalil deb qaralishlik har qanday narsa bo'lsa, shuni ta'minlab berishinglar kerak. Biz shu erishgan dalil asosida adil tanlash va adil qaror ilib berishga tirishamiz.
And so the second thing of vital importance is that the panelists, of whom Nicholas Vetch, who I'm sorry you can't see him, Nicholas Vetch is one. He was also on the China Tribunal, and the two of us are two, and there will be 5 others, possibly 7, but probably 5 others. And what is vital is that those panelists are independent and seen to be independent by the international public.
Yani xizmetimizin ikinci halkalık kısmı, yani bizning bu Uyghur sotida qarori beradigan panelist, yani gruppa a'zolari, yani sotning heyet a'zolaridan men Nicholas Vetch qatorliqlar burun Xitoy sotig'imi biz aralashgan. Bizdan boshqa yana 5 yoki 7 kishi bo'lishi mumkin. Bularning hammasi, bu yana sotga hukm beradigan hay'at, hammasi tamoman mustaqil. Yani mustaqil harakat qilganligimiz va mustaqil ekanligimiz xalqaro jamiyat tarafidan to'liq e'tirof qilingan.
I look forward to answering questions. I hope they can be expressed in one sentence. It's easier for all of us if they are.
Sizlarning savollaringizni kutaman. Agar savollaringizni bir jumla bilan shunday izohlab qo'ysanglar, hammanglarning mush haqida beradigan fikringlar, savollaringiz biz uchun muhim. Shuni kutaman.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey. This was very brief and clear. I just want to remind the audience that the floor is open to questions, so please feel free to send in your questions using the chat. You can also ask your questions in Uyghur language, whether it's Latin or Arabic alphabet. I can read them.
Sualı ba qarindoshlar bo'lsa, suollarni so'rashga hozir ichib etildi, shu munbar. Agar yozma shaklda so'rayman desanglar, mayli yangi yozuvchi bo'lsin, ko'ni yozuvchi bo'lsin, shularning hammani biz o'qib javoblashga tirishamiz.
There is a couple of questions already, so I will start with the first one. So could you please touch base on how would you set up selection criteria for collecting evidence from outside China, and also the selection of the panel? And do you lead the tribunal panel, or do you represent World Uyghur Congress before the tribunal?
Can you repeat that last sentence, please, about panelists?
Yes. How are you planning to lead the tribunal panel, and whether if you present the World Congress before the panel or the tribunal?
Let me explain in Uyghur first, and maybe some audience may not understand English. Okay. Sual kaptı. Bu sualda asasen ikki narsani so'rabdi. Birisi sizlar bu qurib chiqqan so'tinglarda ishlatadigan dalilning o'lchami nima, ya'ni dalilning nima o'lchami bo'yicha sizlar dalilni tanlaysizlar. Ikkinchidan bu qaror berguvchi hay'at bu sotning nima qilganda ularni qaysi o'lcham bo'yicha tanlaysizlar. Ya'ni sizlar bu sotinglar Dunya Uyghur Qurultiyiga oldin ola ma'lumot beramdi yoki o'zinglar mustaqillik nimasi bilan shu o'z qaroringlarni o'zinglar shunday chiqaramsizlar. Ya'ni bir sotning mustaqil bo'lishi, tarafsiz bo'lishi, yana birisi tanlaydigan dalillarga qandaq o'lcham, andan keyin qaror beruvchi hay'atni tanlashda qandaq o'lcham, uch narsa bor ekan bu savolda.
We have already been provided with collections of evidence from various bodies.
Hozirgacha biz nurg'un organlardan ko'p miqdorda dalillarni topshirib bo'ldik.
Where we know of other collections of evidence, we will write and ask for them.
Agar yana shunga munosabatli dalillar bo'lsa, biz buni so'raymiz va mushaqidimi qandaq shakldagi dalillarga ehtiyojimiz bo'lganligini bildiramiz.
We may also ask governments for evidence if they hold any.
Yani biz hükümetlerdenmi bazı dalillarni talab qilishimiz mumkin agar hukumatlarda shunga munosabatli dalillar bo'lsa.
We have a team of, call them researchers, but they are analysts and researchers who will review all the available evidence and make a selection of evidence to go to the panel.
Bizde şu tadqiqot va qonuniy tadqiqot guruhimiz var. Bu tadqiqot guruhimizning bir rolinin birisimi şu mevcut bo'lgan va dalil bo'la oladigan bütün materiallarni tekshirib, tadqiq qilib, buning ichidan dalil bo'lish o'lchamiga to'shilganlarni shu qaror beruvchi hay'atga, ya'ni sud hay'atiga topshirib beradi.
The criteria used will be comparatively obvious, and we may publish them in due course, but they are designed to sorry, let me start again. The criteria used to make the selection of material that goes to the tribunal are fairly obvious. We may make them public in due course.
Bu qandaq dalillarni biz dalil deb qabul qilamiz va dalillarni qabul qilishdagi o'lchamlar nima? Albatta buni yaqinda shu jamoatga ochiq qilishimiz mumkin. Uni, ya'ni dalillarning qandaq narsa dalil bo'ldi, shu dalilga qo'ygan o'lchamlarimizni.
But in summary, the criterion are to establish critical conduct or bad conduct, if any, by the People's Republic of China to the Uyghurs, and designed to consider whether such conduct may be criminal.
Bu yerda bir ölçem bolsa Xitoy hökumətinin Uyğurlarga ilib barğan načar hareketleri ve cinayet şeklini aldığı hareketleri ve Xitoy hökumətinin bu Uyğurlarga ilib barğan bu hareketlerinin şu qırğınçılık cinayeti dep bularni bekitishga yeterlik bo'lib bo'lmaganligi mushularga qaraymiz.
Before I come to the second part of the question and answer, no need to translate this. Zumbaretai, Nick Vetch is trying to get in and can't. If you have a team member who can help, he just says he's asked to go in and can't get in. Second question, panel. We will select a panel by a process of networking in a way, but broader than networking. We will seek the appropriate high-level, independent people who can be trusted.
Bu bahalıqça yani panelni biz tanlaganda deydi. Bizning tanlash jarayonimiz yani ijtimoiy to'r yoki shu insonlar o'rtasidagi munosabat to'ridan foydalanib bu insonlarning ichida yuqori saviyalik ve ishlarning mohiyatini tushunadigan eng muhimi mustaqil fikri var. Yani hiçbir teşkilatga a'zo emas, hiçbir tarafning tarafini tutmaydigan shundoq mustaqil insonlardan tanlaymiz.
I said this was an extended networking process. We will not just be turning to people we know, but asking people who we know or can approach for people who they can assess to be appropriate, and then they may be asked.
Hem de üçüncü yeni bir türü yani bu bahalıqçı ayetini tanlaşımızın. Yani bunu kengaytilgan özümüzün alaka to'ridan foydalanib şu jarayonda ishlar nayt yuqori saviyada anandan keyin ko'pchilik tarafidan bilingan va tarafsizligi ina qo'ygan insonlarga o'zimiz bularga yaqinlashish orqali bularning shu baholovchi hayotga qatnashishini biz o'zimiz so'raymiz.
Mr. Vetch, who I'm happy to see is now on your screens and who was a member of the China Tribunal into forced organ harvesting. No, just a minute. We'll seek, Mr. Vetch and I will seek independent guidance on the final selection of who should be panel members. And we judge this the best way to get a high-level, completely independent panel of people who will do the large amount of work required for, of course, no remuneration and solely in the interests of getting the right answer.
Yani özümüzün şu bahalıqçı heyetini bekitişte yetakchi iddiamiz var. Yani bu bahalıqçı heyetini en ahirki tanlash bosqichimizdami, yani panelga kirgizishdimi, bularning cho'qim ishlarni tushunadigan yuqori saviyada bo'lishi va mustaqil bo'lishi, undan keyin haqsiz ishlashi, shundoq o'lchamlarimiz bor. Chunki shundoq bo'lganda tarafsizlikni saqlay oladi. Ikkinchidan bu bergan qarorningmi tarafsiz, odil bir qaror bo'lib chiqishida shu o'lchamlarning hammasi cho'ng rol o'ynaydi.
Next question.
Keyingi savol.
Does Mr. Vetch want to say hello? It looks as though he may do.
Good afternoon, everybody. I was offline for a little while, so I don't know how much you answered, Sir Geoffrey, but did you answer the question about whether we were representing the panel or the World Uyghur Congress?
No, that I didn't hear that very well. And so that's the reason I didn't answer it. I asked for it. Yes, never mind. Let me deal with that. Or no, why don't you deal with it while you're there? You can deal with it.
Okay. So just, it is very important that it is clear that the tribunal is entirely independent.
Naiti iniq va ochiq bo'lib ketsin, bu bizning sotimiz hech bir tashkilotga bog'liq emas, mustaqil bir sot. Yeah.
It went quiet there, but we are here simply at the invitation of the World Uyghur Congress to explain the process. We are entirely independent of the World Uyghur Congress.
Biz bu yerga faqat Dunya Uyg'ur qurultayining taklifi bilan shu butun sot jarayonlarini tushuntirish uchun keldik. Biz qandaqdir Dunya Uyg'ur qurultayiga yaqindan uzoqdan bog'lanishimiz bo'lgan bir nima emas, biz tamoman mustaqil.
Next question.
I have a couple of questions on the evidence submission. So the Uyghur community would like to know how they can submit evidence to the tribunal, whether they need to go to Germany. I think there might have been some misunderstanding. And what type of evidence should they provide, and to what extent do they need to provide their personal information, because some of them want to keep, of course, their confidential information too.
Thank you.
Okay, now do I need to, let me translate this the question into Uyghur. Nurg'un Uyg'ur qarindoshlarimiz so'rabdi, ya'ni biz bu dalillarni qandoq topshirib beramiz toki Angliyagacha boramdiq yoki qandoq narsalar dalil bo'ldi, ya'ni bu shaxsiy uchurlar buning bexatarlik qandoq bo'ldi degandek shu savolni so'rabdi. Please.
Evidence can be sent to the tribunal in various ways. First, it could be sent personally and directly, or it could be sent by any one of the Uyghur groups or groups concerned with Uyghur problems, if they are themselves providing evidence to us. So it can be done in either way.
Bu dalillarni bizga shu tribunal sotga bevosita yo'llasanlar bo'ldi. Ya'ni o'zinglar yoki bo'lmaydi shu Uyg'ur davosiga shu sot uchun dalil to'plash ishlarini qilayotgan Uyg'ur tashkilotlari orqali yo'llasanlar bo'ldi.
I'm going to let Mr. Verchas answer the next bit.
No, just to reinforce that, there will be a website will be established in the next few days, and there will be a contact point and maybe even a link which you will be able to link to provide evidence. And in regard to the issue of confidentiality, there will be a process to provide completely secure confidential information. Do you want to do that, and then I'll come back?
Yeah, let me. Yana birisi yaqinda shu sot tarafidan bir nayti bexatar bo'lgan bir torbat ichiladi. Shu torbatdami shu guvohliklarning va dalillarni topshiradigan shundoq bir nimamiz bo'ldi, tanlash bo'ldi. Shunda bo'lganda bu yerga yo'llangan uchurlarning bexatarlik jihatdan mutlaq bexatar bo'ladi. Ya'ni insonlarimizning ta'minlagan shaxsiy uchur bo'lsin, har qanday uchur bo'lsin, buning uchur bexatarligi to'liq kafolatga ega qilinadi.
But no confidential information should be sent until that process is established.
Toki shu bexatar torbat shu butun jarayonlar tugagicha qarindoshlarning yoki dalil yo'llovchilarning o'zlari bexatar ya'ni nima sezgir uchur deb qaragan uchurlar hozir yo'llamay turishini umid qilaman.
As to type of evidence, any type of evidence that may have a bearing on the questions being asked of the tribunal can be considered by us.
Yani bu delillerine türü noktası qaragan degende, yani şu sot sormakçı bolgan sualga cevap bereleydigan delillerinin hammasi şunu köz tutumuz deydi.
So although first-hand eyewitness evidence is of course preferable in some ways, it doesn't have to be first-hand eyewitness evidence.
Birinci kol delille elbette en mühim. Eğer birinci kol delille iliş imkanı bulmasa başka delille.
Photographs, video,
Resim. Go ahead.
documents can also be valuable, and so they can be supplied as well.
Resimler, videolar, anladın hüccetler, mesela resmi hüccetler, muşlarının hamısı bakımatlık.
For such material, i.e. anything except a simple piece of paper with a witness statement, for such material, it will be wise to check in advance the form in which it should be conveyed.
Yani muşundak materyallar yollağanlar, yani guvaçılar, yalğız bir parça kağız şekilde yollap koymasdan, özlerinin guvalık nimisini mi, bayannamasını mı koşup yollasa, imza bilen, texme yakşı buldu.
There is likely to be next year at least 2 in-person hearings, depending on whether that's possible with regard to coronavirus.
Kilercili işki guvaçının guvalığını anlaş ihtimallığımız var. Eğer çende virüs sebebiden bu imkansız alığı kemmese, kilercili işki guvaçını anlayımız.
And at that, we will hear evidence directly from witnesses. It cannot be everybody because we've had many evidence packs sent to us.
Hem adamını anlap olalışımız natayın, çünkü bizge kelgen hazırmış şu delillerine aytacak. İşki adamның müşakkada vekil karakterlik işki adamның guvalığını anlayımız.
But there will be a necessity for the tribunal to hear from direct witnesses.
Yani bevasıta, yani birinci kol guvaçılarının guvalığını anlaş, bu sot üçün mü, naytımıyım.
Next question.
King Swal.
So this next question is in Uyghur, so you can translate it into English. Bu mahkeme çıkargan hükümlü her qaysı devlet ve hükümetler itiraf kılamdı.
The judgment rendered by the tribunal be accepted by other states and the international community? That is the question.
We can't say.
Biz onunla biz nasıl diyemeyiz?
Maybe, it may not be.
Belki kabul kıldı, belki kabul kılmaydı.
What experience with other tribunals shows this.
Bizden hazırgıça şu sottan çıkargan xulasımız şu, tecrübemiz.
In many governments, there will be parliamentarians, politicians, who seek to open up accurate and honest answers to difficult questions.
Nurgun devletlerde, hükümetlerde, siyasetçiler şu cevapsız kalan suallar için, cevap tepiş için yol izleydi.
If such people are provided with a judgment, the reasoning of which is faultless, based on evidence that is of integrity, then it is much easier for such politicians or parliamentarians to compel states to accept the judgment.
Eğer biz çıkargan hüküm, en ahırkı hüküm ve hükümle çıkarışta biz düşündüğün sebep nime üçün şu hükümge kelgenimiz doğrusideki sebepler hemminasi yaxşı, tarafsız, adil halda düşündürülgende muşundaq cevapsız kalgan suallarının cevabını izleydiğin nurgun devlet ve hükümetteki siyasetçiler ve parlament azaları bunu burunmacak işletken işletiş imkanı hazır mı var?
And of course, individual countries and the United Nations and the United Nations Human Rights Council and other international bodies can accept the judgment themselves without qualification. Whether they will do so, we can't forecast.
Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı, Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'nın Kişilik Hukuk Komiteti Kengaşı qatarlıq müşə xalqara organlar yani o tarafsız verilgen sot hükümlerini kabul kıldı, lekin biz ular çokum hazırda başlap kabul kıldı dep oldun ala tahmin yürütemeyiz.
Next question.
King sual.
So we have a couple of questions regarding, I guess, it's to follow up with that question. If China is convicted or proved to be committed crimes against humanity or genocide, what would be the consequence for China, and can there be consequences, punishment imposed on China? As we know, this is not a public or as we know, this is a public and independent people's tribunal. This is if the ruling if the ruling is positive on genocide, how will this affect on governments or relevant UN bodies, and how what benefit may Uyghur people get from this endeavor?
I will divide this answer into two parts. Mr. Vetch will deal with the second part.
Let me maybe he could just translate the.
Agar chanda o ingliz yozgan so'zni qisqartirib tarjima qilay. Agar Xitoy hukumatı sizlarning sotning natijasida Uyg'urlarga nisbatan qirg'inchilik jinoyat o'tkazdi deb sotlanib va gunohkor bo'lib chiqsa, ya'ni sotda bu hukm berilsa, buning oqibati Xitoy uchun qanday bo'ldi? Xitoyni jazolay olamsizlar? Ya'ni Xitoyga bu sotning hukmini qanday ijro qilasizlar degan savol.
Bringing China to justice at any court is extremely difficult, and many regard it as almost impossible.
Xitoyni xalqaro sotlarga chiqarish, ya'ni boshqa xilma-xil sotlarga chiqarish asosan hozircha qiyin va hatto imkonsiz darajada.
This is because in part of China's seat on the permanent seat on the Security Council of the United Nations.
Chunki Xitoyning Birlashgan Davlatlar Tashkiloti bexatarlik kengashida mangulik o'rni bor.
In part on China's commercial power vis-a-vis in relation to other countries.
Yana birisi Xitoyning nurg'un davlatlarga ta'sir qila oladigan moliya kuchi bor.
And because normally it requires another country to bring a state such as China to judgment.
Normal ahvolda, yana Xitoyni sudga berish uchun boshqa bir davlat tarafidan Xitoy haqida shikoyat qilinib, Xitoyni sudga chaqirish kerak.
So technically very difficult, near impossible.
Shunda bo'lganda, shu jarayonlar nihoyatda qiyin va hatto imkonsiz.
Remember that there have been recent examples where courageous countries like the Gambia have been able to take countries to the International Court of Justice, where until recently we had thought that might be impossible.
Yani şunu esimizden saqlashimiz kerakki, dunyoda yana Gambiyadek jasur davlatlar bor. Yaqingacha agar Gambiya bu Rohingya munosabatlik bu qirg'inchilikni sotga ekanmagan bo'lsa, ya'ni shunday bir davlat chiqami deb biznim qilgan, shundaq davlatlarmi chiqadi.
And this difficulty or near impossibility is despite the fact that under the Geneva Convention, countries who have ratified the convention and who know genocide may have been committed are bound by undertakings to do something.
Şunu esimizde tutuşumuz gerekki, şu Geneva qirg'inchilik ahdnomasiga imzo qo'ygan davlatlar hammasi agar xohlagan bir yerda qirg'inchilik yuz bergan va yuz berish ehtimolligida bo'lgan bo'lsa, bu davlatlarning bu qirg'inchilikning yuz berishini to'sash va yuz berishining oldini olishdan iborat mas'uliyatlari bor. Shunlashqa davlatlarning bu jihatdanmi bu qirg'inchilik masalasida ig'ir mas'uliyati bor.
So my last sentence on this, depending on what the judgment is, there are prospects of governments being persuaded or being happy to accept the judgment, and there are distant maybe possibilities of doing something in law at a court. But Mr. Vetch will tell you about the second potential of a judgment to serve within civil society.
Yani şunak bo'lganda buni esinglardan tutinglar, bu qaror chiqqandan keyin yani nurg'un davlatlar ularning mushaqqida milliy qirg'inchilik haqida shu Jeneva qirg'inchilik ahdnomasi tufaylidan ustiga olgan majburiyatlari bo'lgani uchun buni qabul qilish va buni o'zlarining ichki siyosatida vaqtli qarorda buni ishlatish haqidami buni bir safarbarlik kuchi o'rnida ishlatishi mumkin. Savolning ikkinchi qismiga Vetch apandi javob bersin.
So as Sir Geoffrey says, depending on the determination of the judgment, the outcome of the judgment, and if it is accepted by governments, and if it is truly authoritative, then it becomes more difficult for them not to accept it.
Yana deganimizdek, Nice apandi o'tirib qo'ygandek, yani bu sotning qarorini qabul qilish masalasiga kelganda, agar sotning hukmi to'liq sababga, ana degan tarafsizlikka va belgilik imtiyozga ega holda o'tirg'i chiqsa, nurg'un davlatlarning buni qabul qilmasligini tashkil to'xtaydi.
And the result could be that governments will have to think about and recalibrate their relationship with China.
Shundoq bo'lganda, ya'ni bu sotning nimasi chiqqandan keyin davlatlar o'zlarining Xitoy bilan bo'lgan munosabatlarini sotning natijasidan keyin qayta o'ylashish va qayta tuzib chiqishga majbur qiladi.
Even if it is in narrow fields, such as prohibiting, for instance, the sale of surveillance equipment or certain types of medical equipment to China.
Shunda bo'lganda, nayti tar bir nimadan men tushunganimda, Xitoyga setilgan yoki Xitoyga bo'lgan munosabatlarda nurg'un narsalarda ta'sir bo'ldi. Masalan, Xitoyga setilgan kuzatish apparatlari, uskunalari yoki dora degandek shu narsalardimi bu sotning hukmining nayti ig'ir ta'sir bo'ldi.
And with regard to individuals within the PRC who may have been involved, depending on the judgment, it will be open to states to potentially sanction those individuals. And indeed, there is legislation, for instance, in the United States, which allows them to do that.
Endi Xitoydagi shu Uyg'urlarning milliy qirg'inchiligiga munosabatlik Xitoydagi shaxslar, ya'ni hukumatda har xil yerda rol olgan shaxslarning jazolanish masalasi bu davlatlarga qolib qolgan masala. Davlatlar o'zi qonun chiqarish va har xil jazo tadbirlarini o'tirib qo'yish orqali shu bizning e'lon qilgan sot hukmimizda tilga olingan yoki jinoyat qatnashgan shaxslarni jazolash yo'llarini izlay oladi, topa oladi.
And lastly, and perhaps most importantly in some senses, is that this will provide we believe, an authoritative body of evidence with a judgment which we hope will be incontrovertible, and it will be there forever.
Eng muhimi, shundaq kuchlik dalillar bilan o'tirg'i chiqqan bu sotning hukmi imtiyozli bir hukm bo'ldi. Anandan keyin ayt güçlük deliller astıda deliller bilen berilgen hüküm buldu ve bu tarihte mengü kep kaldı.
That's it.
One last sentence on this. There is much interaction between China and other countries over education, tourism, commerce, and so on. And all bodies dealing with that interaction, whichever way, to China, from China, will have the judgment and may feel morally obliged to have the judgment in mind before it, for example, builds a university in China or has China build a university in England or similar.
Yeni bir jihatdan şunu esimizden tutuşumuz gerek ki nurgun devletler Xitay bilen alaq qıldı. Bu alaqın meyli turizm bolsun, muarib bolsun, soda sitik bolsun, her xil Xitay bilen bolgan alaq qıldıgan devletler ve Xitaymo bu devletler bilen bu şekilde alaq qıldı. Endi Xitay bilen mushundaq her xil alaqalar ve uçurishlar ve almashtırishlar bolganda bu sot tarafından berilgen bu sot hükmünden keyin nurgun devletler ahlaki jihatdan ve nima jihatdan özlerini bu xil alaqalarning yani turizm degandek başka alaqalarning ko'zdan kechirilishi ve bunu nim qilishga majbur qiladi. Chunki bu bir qirg'inchilik soti hukmidan keyin yana ishlar yana normal o'z beti davom qilmaydi demoqchi gapning qisqasi.
Geoffrey, could I just finish off that?
Of course, yes.
But of course, it is very important to just remind you what Sir Geoffrey said earlier, which is that the tribunal's job function is to deliver a judgment. It is for others to use that judgment for whatever purposes they see fit. And that is very important to understand.
Şunu ben eskartib qo'yay. Ma Geoffrey Nice apandi burun degandek. Yani bizning bu sotning eng oxirgi maqsadi yana bir hukmnoma chiqarish. Endi bu hukmnomani ishlatish bo'lsa, nurg'un davlatlar va xalqaro organlarning vazifasi. Biz faqat shu hukmnoma chiqarish tarafini qilamiz ishni.
And it is also important to reiterate, to repeat that we make no prejudgment about what the outcome of the tribunal will be.
Shuni tekrar hatırlatıp qo'yish kerakki, bu sotning hukmining qanday bo'lishi haqida bizning hech birimizning oldin ala fikri yoki oldin ala hukmi yo'q.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question is about mostly about the funding. So I will ask the question in Uyghur and then you can translate it to English. Bu sotga qatnashadigan sotchilar va qonun sinachilar haqsiz ishlaymiz va haq olmaymiz dedi. Lekin sot ishlarining elib berilishi uchun bu pul kerak deyilyotdi. Bu pul nima uchun ishlatildi? Andan keyin mushuni bir
The question it is already repeated that and the judges are working for no fee basis. And there is also circulated campaign saying that we need a certain amount of money for this tribunal. So, if judges are working for free, and what this money to be used for?
I think I'll let Mr. Vetch deal with that. He's a businessman.
Vetch cevap versin de.
So the judges are working for free, for pro bono, but there is a lot of people involved in this. So we have 7 researchers, evidence readers, and they are generally youngish people in their 20s, early 30s. And this is a long project that may go on until next year. And we are the tribunal will be paying them, albeit at quite modest levels.
Deganimizdek, bu yerda hukm beradigan sotchilar hammasi haqsiz ishlaydi, ular haq olmaydi. Lekin bu ishga yolg'iz sotchilar emas, nurg'un odamlar aralashadi. Masalan, hozir 7 tadqiqotchimiz bor va boshqalar yoshlar 20-30 yoshlardagi shundaq ishlayotganlar bor. Bularning vazifasi shu topshirib olgan dalil deb topshirib olgan materiallarni o'qish, tadqiq qilish, shuningdan dalil bo'ladigan materiallarni arish. Yana birisi bu kelar yilgacha davomlashadigan uzun bir plan, programma.
There will be, as I've said earlier, 2 hearings, at least, probably in London. And for that, we need to rent rooms, probably in a venue, in a conference hall somewhere in central London. We will need camera equipment. We'll need translation equipment. We will need a good deal of interpretation and quite a bit of support.
Yana uzun 2 yilgacha davom qilgan bir plan programmani dedik. Yana 2 bu yerda bir guvohchini anglash sot ilib berildi bu Londonda. Shunlashqa bu sot maydoni uchun ya ijaraga olish kerak. Anadan keyin u sot, ya'ni shu normal sot bilan o'xshash nimalarga, uskunalarga ega bo'ladi. Shunda bo'lganda apparatlar va tarjima va material tarjimasi guvohchining yana nurg'un ishlar bor qilgan.
Although the tribunal members will not be paid, they may come from different parts of the world, and so it would be right that the tribunal will pay for their airfares and their accommodation costs whilst in London.
Yani bu sotchilar pulanmaydi degan gap ham ishni yanchuqadan chiqarib qiladi deganlik emas. Yani bu sotchilarning ba'zilari boshqa davlatlardan keldi. Bularning aeroplan biletlari bor, shu sot jarayonida qoladigan yotoqlari bor. Demakki, shuning chiqimini shu sotga to'plangan puldan chiqim qilamiz.
And in addition, although the tribunal members will make the judgment, it will be their responsibility to make the judgment. The tribunal members may well be, beyond excluding Sir Geoffrey, will not be lawyers, and therefore the tribunal will engage 3 very senior lawyers to provide a legal opinion. So they will be given the evidence that has been given to the tribunal members.
Yani bu yerda bu sotda yani baş sotchilar qonun mutaxassisi bo'lgandan boshqa bu sotga da baholovchi hay'at bor. Bu baholovchi hay'atlar bilan birga bu sotning qarori chiqadi. Shunday bo'lganda bu baholovchi hay'atning hammasi yani advokat bo'lgan bo'lishi notayin. Yani bunun içinde 3 peshqadam advokatlar bor. Bu advokatlar advokat bo'lmagan boshqa shu baholovchi tarafsiz ammo yuqori saviyalik shu baholovchi deb tanlagan baholovchi hay'at a'zolariga shu nimalarni dalillarni va qonuniy jihatdan ba'zi nimalarni tushuntiradi.
And so this legal opinion will be the foundation of the judgment. So it won't be. It'll be a foundation of the judgment, so that the judgment is as robust as is possible to make. And these lawyers will be the world's most senior lawyers, and they are expensive.
Yani bu biz hozir gapini qilgan 3 peshqadam hurmatga sazovor bu advokatlarni biz taklif qilib bu sotning biz Uyg'ur qirg'inchilik sotining hay'at a'zolariga yoki baholovchi a'zolarga bu qonuniy jihatdan dars o'tkazishimizda bularga pul to'laymiz. Bularning nimasimi bak qimmat. Ya'ni bu xil qonuniy kichikkinam qonuniy fikrlarni bu sotning baholug'i jihatiga berish, ularni belgilik savatga ega qilishning o'zi shu sotning chiqargan hukmining rulini tashkil qildi va bu xizmatlarimizning muhim tarkibiy qismi.
And then lastly, there'll be some additional costs such as setting up a website and so on.
Yani yana shu websaytni loyihalash, uning bexatarligi degandek shu jihatlarga belgilik az o'sim mablag' ketdi.
So just to give you an idea of already, this has only been, the tribunal has only really started its work 4 or 5 weeks ago. There are already about 20 people involved in this now.
Yana bu sot boshlangali uzun bo'lmadi. 9-oyning 3-kuni e'lon qilgan bo'lsa, yani 2 haftadak bo'ldi. Hozirgacha 20 dan ortiq odam ishlashga boshladi.
Hope that answers the question.
May I add 2 points? We're obviously very concerned to minimize expenditure, not just because funding comes from private individuals, but there is in a way a philosophy to show governments and international bodies that exercises like this can be done swiftly and economically.
Yana bir ishki nuqtani qo'shib qo'yay. Biz shu sot ketilgan chiqimlarni eng ozga tushirish, eng oz shaklda shu moliya kuchi hajlab natija olishga tirishyapmiz. Yana birisi ikkinchi jihatdan bu sotning yana bir falsafalik ahamiyatimi, yana boshqa sotlardek uzun davom qilgan emas, qisqa va tarafsiz holda tarafsiz shu hukmni eng qisqa vaqtda berish.
It's not only the panel members, including Mr. Vetch and me, who are already working pro bono without fee, but senior members of the management of the tribunal have elected to work without fee.
Yani bu sotning hukmini beradigan nimalar ichida asosan bular bekorlik ishlagan bilan butun sotning shu idoriy jihatdan boshqarilishi, anadan keyin shu sotni nima qilganlar ichida yuqori saviyalik insonlar bor. Bular hamda bu qaror berish mexanizmiga qatnashmaganlar bir sotning sog'lom natijalik bo'lishi uchun keladigan nurg'un ishlarni qildi. Bularga pul to'lashimiz kerak.
And finally, although the 3 senior lawyers must be selected on the basis of their legal skills, it will be my pleasure to invite them to consider not charging for their work either.
Yani bu 3 peshqadam advokatlar, biz pul to'lamoqchi bo'lgan advokatlar, yani shu Angliyada bo'lsin, nimada bo'lsin, aytdi, yuqori saviyalik advokatlar sho'lashqa bularga oldin ola hukm berib, u ya bu shaklda hukm bermasligimiz kerak.
Okay, thank you for this. I am very conscious of time, so I have 2 more really relevant questions that I'd like to, I guess like people would like answers to that, and then I think we should be it.
Okay, that's fine.
First one is people have been asking how can ordinary citizens help to contribute to this tribunal? Are there ways to help with the evidence and analysis process as a volunteer? And also someone asked, and how could the UK government support the tribunal?
Right. Let's, Mr. Vetch, deal with the first part and the channel to which offers should be made, bearing in mind that there comes a balance. So, sorry.
I know it's.
No, off you go, Mr. Totti.
Yes, can you summarize the question, please? Now my mind.
Yeah, my fault.
Not worry.
So the question was, how can ordinary citizens help to support this tribunal? Are there ways to help with the evidence and analysis process as a volunteer? And also, in what way the UK government can support the tribunal?
Part 1, Mr. Vetch.
Okay, there are 3 savol kam bu. Yani biz odatdagi puhro bo'lish nimamiz bilan bu sotni qanday qo'llay olamiz? Anadan keyin bu shu Delillen toplashda biz mi halisani işlesek yoki delillen toplash va boshqa delillarni analiz qilish nimalarida halisani ishlaydigan haqidagi savol ekan. Yana bir bu savolning bir tarkibi, yana Angliya hukumatı bunga qanday yordam qila oladi degandek. Go ahead.
Okay. So the best way of supporting this for most people will be to let us have the evidence, and that can come, as I say, we will put up fairly shortly a contact point on the website.
Eng yaxshi yordam qilish, buni himoya qilishning yo'li, yana shu dalil jihatdan bo'ldi. Yaqinda biz shu torbatni ichib o'tgandan keyin shuningda yani mazmunni ko'rsatadigan qaysi mazmundagi dalillarga bizning ehtiyojimiz bor, shuni ko'rsatadigan bir tanlash bo'ldi torbatda.
The World Uyghur Congress have already been very helpful and provided us with a good deal of evidence, and there's no reason why you can't let them have it and they will pass it on to us.
Dunya Uyghur Qurultayı allaqachon bizga shu dalil jihatdan jiq materiallarni topshirdi. Yordamchi bo'lyapti. Shuna bo'lganda, ya'ni buning qiziqqan yoki buning yordam qilgan kishilarning Dunya Uyghur Qurultayı bilan aloqa qilishning hech qanday ziyni yo'q.
As far as the analysis of the evidence itself, we now have a team, I think, as I've explained, of in fact 7 researchers. And it may be at some point that having Uyghur researchers or people familiar with the process may be helpful, but we're a little bit early for that. But if you feel that you have the necessary skills, then either contact us through the World Uyghur Congress or via the contact on the website.
Shu dalillarning analiz nuqtasiga kelganda, hozir bizda allaqachon 7 tadqiqotchi shuningga ishlayotdi. Hamda Uyg'ur tadqiqotchilar yoki fidoyilar shuning ishlayman deganda buningga biroz baldo'g'lik kelishi mumkin, chunki bu dalillarni tadqiq qilish, nima qilishda shu sotning o'lchami bo'yicha biz talab qilgan ba'zi mahoratlarga ega bo'lish kerak, bu ishlayman, yordam qilaman degan insonlar. Şonlaşqa bu, lekin oldimizdagi kunlarda shu dalillar texmo kelishga, texmo ko'payishga boshlaganda, bularni analiz qilish yoki bu Uyg'urcha ba'zi darslarni o'qish, nima qilish degandagi albatta yordamga ehtiyojimiz bo'lishi mumkin.
But I reiterate that this is not an advocacy or an activist endeavor, so it is purely about analyzing evidence in a dispassionate way.
Yani buningda yana tarafsizlik nuqtasidan da'vatida bu qandaqdir bir davoni himoya qilish yoki bir faoliyatchilik ishi emas, bu tamoman tarafsiz nima bir ko'z bilan to'plangan dalillarni analiz qilish masalasi shunda da'vatida.
Geoffrey.
And two things: there will be a substantial requirement for translation and interpretation, possibly, for example, I think by Mr. Totti, but also by World Uyghur Congress. That may be one place in which volunteers can help.
İşte narsani men nima qilib qo'yaydi, shu hamda bu analizchilarga yoki shu tarjimonlarga qo'yilgan belgilik bir talab bor deydi. Yana tarafsizlikni demakchi bu yerda, chunki his tuyg'u aralashib qolsa tarjimalarga sotning hukmiga manfiy ta'sir qilmasin deb shu jihatdan qayta eskartyapti. Masalan, Dunya Uyg'ur Qurultayidek yoki boshqa organlardek shunday yerlarda xolisona ishlaydiganlar shu orqali ishlash orqali bu yordamni bizga bera oladi deydi.
And remember Mr. Vecchi's point that we are not activists, we're just doing cold analysis. And if we have lots of volunteers, as we may, there comes a point when we can't use the volunteers because there are too many, and because management would take more time than would be gained by using them. So if you volunteer and are not turned to for help, do not be offended.
Yana birisi takrorlab qo'yish kerakki, biz bir siyosiy faoliyatchi yoki bir Uyg'urlarning davosini himoya qiluvchi emas. Biz ko'zimiz qorg'u, hissiyotsiz shaklda kelgan dalillar qaraymiz. Shu dalillar nima degan bo'lsa, shu dalillar bo'yicha qaror beramiz. Yana buni faoliyatchilik yoki bir da'vo himoyachilig'idan farqlantirgan narsa deb alohida ta'kidlanadi. Ondan keyin mana fidoyilar qismi kelganda yana hozir bizga yetarlik fidoyilar hozir ishlayotidi. Lekin biz hozir bir gaplarni deb qo'yib, ertaga texnik fidoyilar chiqsa, buni boshqaruvchilar bularni nega ishga qo'yishini bilmay texnik qalayimqonchilik bo'lishi mumkin. Shunlashqa hozircha uningga biroz baldo'liq keldi.
So far as,
Yeah, go ahead.
so far as the British government is concerned, we have had vocal support from parliamentarians of all principal parties.
Endi Angliya davlatining bizga qanday yordam qilib qilmasligi masalasiga kelsak, Angliyadagi siyosiy partiyalardan nurg'unlari ig'izaki bizga bizning shu tarafsiz xizmatimizni qo'llaydiganligini bildirishdi.
The government has expressed the view that there should be an independent investigation into allegations about Uyghurs, but they did not have our tribunal in mind when they were persuaded to make that statement.
Angliya hukumatining bu masalada ko'z qarashi bo'lsa, shu Uyg'ur qirg'inchilik sotining tarafsiz va mustaqil holda shu o'tirg'i chiqqan dalillar asosida bir tekshirish ilib berishini qo'llaydiganligi mushulam.
We regard the fact that parliamentarians from England or from anywhere else should say it is a good idea to have this tribunal is helpful, but that does not affect our independence.
Yani Angliya va yoki dunyoning boshqa joylaridagi parlament a'zolari va siyosatchilar bo'lsin, shundoq bir tarafsiz sotning bo'g'ini yaxshi deb fikr bayon qilsa, albatta biz xush bo'lamiz, lekin bu bayon qilingan fikrlar bizning bu sotning mustaqil holda hukm berish tarafsizligimizga ta'sir qilmaydi.
And we will not, of course, engage ourselves in direct contact with the British government unless they ask, and except for possibly asking them to provide evidence that they may have.
Yani biz Angliya hukumati bilan aloqa qilishga tamshalmaymiz yoki u haqida bir tirishchanligimiz yo'q, faqat Angliya hukumati biz bilan aloqa qilib so'raydigan narsalar olsa uning javob beramiz. Yana bir jihatdan, agar Angliya hukumatining qo'lida shu Uyg'ur qirg'inchilik sotiga munosabatlik biz ishlatayligidek dalil bo'lsa, buni ilish uchun biz aloqa qilishimiz mumkin.
Is that the last question?
I think the part of the question is whether or not the UK government is providing any financial help.
Oh, no, none.
Agar qarindoshlarning ahvolini so'rashdiki nimasida, agar Angliya hukumati yo davlatlarning biroz moliya jihatdan sotga yordam qilamdi deganni ko'z tutgan bo'lsa, endi men shu ehtimollikni bor deb ma'ni eskartib qo'ydim. Bu sot hech bir davlat yoki hech bir nimalardan undaq pul olmaydi. Tarafsizlikni saqlash uchun davlatlardan, siyosiy partiya deganlardan hech qanday pul yoki iyona yoki yordam qabul qilmaydiganligini eskartib qo'ydim.
Was that the last question, or was it the second to last question?
That was I have another question, but
Okay, the last question. Thank you. I mean, I don't mind going on, but we are a bit pressed for time. Yeah.
For the previous question?
Sorry, we didn't hear you. Could you say it again, please?
Oh, sorry. Did you have something to add on the previous questions about how people can support, or that's it? I can.
No, I think I've said that the.
Yeah, I think it is clear.
Yeah. Okay. So,
so the only other thing we as I've already indicated, we will be raising some funds. I know there is something going around in the community. We have said to the World Uyghur Congress that there will be funds coming from other sources. We don't want it only to come from from that, but any assistance in that regard will be helpful. There will be a various initiatives which will be coming out, including maybe a crowdfunding platform in due course, and you'll be able to contact us, as I say, via the website.
Ama maliye yani iqtisad toplash meselesi de biz allaqachon mustaqil shu sot uchun pul toplashni boshladik. Ba'zi pullar kelyapti deydi. Yana shu sotimizni qo'llab tarafsiz aldı shu sotga tarafsiz aldı yordam beraman deyotganlarım bor. Yana Uyg'urlardan pul toplayotgan ishlarni men bilaman deydi. Şolaşqa ma torbitimizden bo'lib ishga kirishib, men aslim qilgandan keyin bu ishlar hammasi o'zining yo'li bilan davom qildi deb shunaqay.
Okay. So last question. I'm very conscious of time. So I have a lot of different questions that I've just tried to, summarize in one question. So this one is again on the evidence. I think they want to know now that China has invited the EU for a visit on ground. Does the future reporting or the access to ground has an impact on the decision of the tribunal, and also because it is so hard to get information from directly from the ground, what is the procedure that is going to be used by the tribunal, whether the evidence needs to be solid direct evidence, or it can be indirect evidence as well can be included. And lastly, is there a time limit? Someone asked if something that happened in the 30s or 40s, is that going to be considered as well?
Let me explain in Uyghur. Let me briefly. Yakında Xitoy hukumati shu Yevropa birligidan bir vakillarni shu Sharqiy Turkistonga berishga taklif qildi. Shunday bo'lganda bu Sharqiy Turkistondan dalil to'plash uchun shu yerdagi shu tuproqqa berib nim qilish biroz tez. Endi bu Xitoylar bu Yevropa birligidan vakillarni yo'q taklif qilgandan keyin ba'zi yolg'ondan bir narsalarni deyish mumkin. Shunday tashviqotlar sizlarning yani bu dalil toplash narsalarga ta'sir qilamdi degandek bir savol. Yana bevosita dalillarni qanday olasizlar? Chunki bevosita deganimiz bevosita vatandan nim qilgan dalillar hamda shunda yana birisi shu dalil toplashning bir vaqt cheklamasi bormi? Ya'ni 30-yil, 40-yillardagi ba'zi narsalarni dalil deb ishlatgan bo'lamdi. Savolning qisqartirilmasi. Please go ahead.
Evidence of all types is admissible or acceptable, as I said earlier on. It doesn't have to be first hand.
Dalil deb qaralgan har qanday dalil, yani birinchi qo'l bo'lsin yoki bevosita yoki material nima har qanday dalil bizning tarafimizdan qabul qilinadi.
The European Union visit and whatever report they produce is something that will obviously have to be considered.
Yevropa birligining Xitoyga bo'lgan ziyarati va u ziyoratdan keyin agar biror doklad e'lon qilsa, bu chiqadigan dokladlar albatta bizning diqqatimizdan qochmaydi.
The statements in written and oral form coming from the People's Republic of China in newspapers and by their ambassadors on television increasingly deal with some of the allegations that have been made, and those statements, written and oral and so on, will also have to be dealt with.
Yani ondan başka Xitoy hukumatidan e'lon qilingan yozma shakllik bayonotlar va har xil gazetlarga bergan nimalar bayonotlar, anadagi Xitoyning bu chet eldagi elchilarining shu vatanimizda bo'layotgan har xil Xitoyning zulmiga munosabatli o'tirib qo'ygan ayblashlarni oqlash uchun bergan har xil bayonlari, bular hammasi biz diqqatga oladigan masalalar.
And the People's Republic of China will, of course, be invited to the proceedings and invited to contribute to the proceedings, to give evidence to the proceedings.
Yani biz bu sotqimi Xitoy Xalq Cumhuriyetini ikki sotqa biz taklif qilamiz deydi. Ular o'zlari bilgan paketlarni o'tirib qo'ysin. Ular bunun kelib deydigan gap bo'lsa shu sotda desa bo'ldi.
if any individuals are identified by evidence as people from whom it would be appropriate for us to hear in evidence, then we will probably write to them as well and seek their assistance.
Yani kişiler içinde şu sotның berdiğan hükümnaması üçün guvalık berişi yoki fikrini ilişimiz muvafık deb qaralgan şunaq insanlar bolsa biz ulardan mı fikir ilişimiz mümkün, ularning mı kelip delil o'rnida yoki boshqa fikr berishini biz kutamiz.
Mr. Vetch?
Yes, with regard to UN or EU visits, we will, as Geoffrey says, most certainly take that into account, in consideration. But of course, we will have to make judgments about whether those visits have been sanitized in some shape or form, and whether the people visiting have actually seen the real state of affairs. And I make no judgment about that one way or another, but that would have to be to our satisfaction.
Albatta Birleşken Devletler Teşkilatı'nın Avrupa Birliği'nin şu bizning vatanga munosabatlik ilib borgan ziyoratlari va u ziyoratdan keyin bergan bayonotlari degandek bu narsalar bizning diqqatimiz doirasida bo'ladi, ya'ni diqqatimizdan qochadigan narsalar emas, lekin biz beradigan hukmnomamizni faktaga asosan beramiz. Ularning o'rinlashtirgan har xil programmalari yoki programlardan keyin o'tirg'a chiqadigan siyosiy bayonotlar u bo'la. Bu masalaning bir tarafini ko'rsatsimi, lekin eng asosligi bizning bergan shu sud hukmida hamda bizning qaror berishimizga asos bo'ladigan birdan-bir narsa dalil.
Zumreta, I see that some 12 participants have already had to leave, and I note that there are some questions that are unanswered.
Yeah.
Before your closing remarks, you can explain this to those online. If there are questions that you think it would be helpful to answer in writing and that are unanswered, if you gather them up and tell the people online that we will try and answer them. We are very, very busy, but we will try and answer them as soon as maybe. And if you have an address list, then you can give them the answers that way. With our apologies for not being able to deal with them today, but our enormous thanks to Mehmet Totti, who has dealt with the difficult exercise of sequential interpretation in an impeccable way.
Thank you.
And Zumretai for setting up the, well, you carry on, please.
That's fine. I want to briefly translate what the Sir Geoffrey Nice said. Deydi, bizni ayt aldirash deydi. Hozir bu qarindoshlarni so'ragan savollardan biz javob berolmaganlari bo'lsa yoki bizning javob berishga tegishlik savollar bundan keyin so'ralishi mumkin. Shularning hammasini bir tizimlik qilib yo'llab bersang deydi. Biz keyin nima qilsak, biz aldirash o'g'rimiz shunda bizning nimsini aytadi. Ya'ni programni balduroq tugatsak demakchi. Ya'ni men ham tarjimamga biroz mubolag'a asosida rahmat deb aytadi. I appreciate it for that. Comments. Şu anda Zumratay sizde.
And thank you for Zumretai also for your assistance and doing this.
Zumratayga ko'p rahmat, yaxshi moderatorlik qilgani uchun.
Yes, I just want to remind people that so the tribunal is working on setting up a frequently asked question page on the website. So if you haven't received all your answers today, this page will be available at some point soon. So just stay. So don't worry. There will be a page dedicated for your questions, and of course you can have also private inquiries. I think.
Qarindoshlarning diqqatiga shuni eskartib qo'yaylik. Yangidan e'lon qilmoqchi bo'lgan bu to'g'ri batda doim so'riladigan savollar bir bo'limi bor. Shuningda shu doim so'riladigan savollar haqida berilgan javoblar bor. Shularga bu yerdan butun javoblarni topqil bo'ldi.
Okay, so that was I think the last. I tried to really brief all the questions and and take all the most relevant ones. So Thank you, everyone, especially the panelists. Thank you, Geoffrey Nice. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Mehmetka. Everyone for your precious time for being here, and all of the attendees for submitting your very relevant questions. And of course, we can of course follow the Uyghur Tribunal and the endeavor closely, and you'll stay updated.
Hamala köp rahmet Geoffrey Nice efendiga, andan keyin Veç efendiga, Zumrat agam, hem sual soragan qarindaşlarga mençin ayt yaxşı program boldy. Qarindaşlarning kalısky nurgun suallarni aydınlaştırdı dep qarayman. Köp rahmet.
Last thing, this was also recorded, so if you have missed it or you want to share it with people, this will also be available after today's event.
Yani en ahırkı bir izahat, bu bütün bu söhbet hatırlandı. Şolaşka bunu körüşünü kaçırıp koygan qarindaşlarımız bolsa, keyinki şu hatırlangan kısmından körelaydı ve başkalarına ortaklaşıp texmi köp tarqıtışga yordam qılalaydı. Rahmet.
So I will end this now. So thank you everyone again.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you.